The Blast from Our Past Network.
Lock your doors, close your windows, turn out your lights, for chills and thrills await you. It's time for Podcasting After Dark with your hosts, Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer. Stay with a friend, say your prayers as grisly ghouls close in to seal your doom, and enjoy this bonus episode of Podcasting After Dark.
What's up, Padsters? It's your boy Corey, aka Sleazy C, coming at you with another mini solo movie review. This time, I'm going to be covering Alien Romulus. I figured it was about time to sort of gather all of my thoughts after I've seen this movie a few times and kind of, put them out there into the world. Now, I did review it with our good pal Max over at Ready to Retro last year when the movie first came out. I had only seen it, I believe, once by the time I had to, review on his podcast. So it's a pretty fresh take on my part. So go back and listen to it if you get a chance. That's over on Ready to Retro. But by this point now, I've seen the movie 5 times. So I kind of, I might have a little bit of a different take on things than I did then. So there might be a little, there might be some contradictions. I might feel differently about things now than I did then. And, we'll talk it out. We'll talk it out. But before we jump into this review of Alien Romulus, I just want to remind everybody that we do have a pretty robust Patreon page. And that's patreon.com/podcastingafterdark, where Zach and I produce a lot of exclusive content for our Patreon members. And it helps keeps the lights on and helps keep us going and everything. And swing on by if you got a chance. And that's patreon.com/podcastingafterdark. All right, guys and gals, if you're new to the show, I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory on me and my Alien fandom, sort of where I'm coming from when I watch a movie like this. Those of you who have been listeners of the show for a while now, you know all this already, but I'll kind of just put it out there. I saw Aliens for the first time in the theater when I was 8 years old. The year that it came out, my father took me to see it because the 80s were a magical time and parents didn't really give a shit about ratings. It went on to become my favorite movie of all time. My personal slogan, my first personal mantra is Star Wars is life, but Aliens is my favorite movie. I grew up also reading all the Dark Horse Aliens comics back in the 90s. So while I very much enjoy Alien 3, I have a good time every now and again with Resurrection. Don't quite love that one. And while I don't quite consider Prometheus and Covenant canon in my head, I do recognize that, this movie does take place in this entire, filmatic universe, and you can't just take what you want and pick and choose from it. You have to sort of accept everything. That being said, the first time I saw the movie, the third act, and guys, we're going to have to be a little bit spoilery here, because, the movie's been out for long enough. You guys can check it out, obviously, at this point. I didn't love the finale. I didn't love the offspring. I don't love Prometheus, being a part of my Aliens universe, but it is what it is. And, having seen the movie 5 times now, the last act isn't as jarring for me anymore, and I can actually kind of absorb it as it is, take it for face value and kind of, enjoy it for what it is. Romulus very much is a movie that loves the entire franchise, not just bits and pieces of it. But, like always, my headcanon is going to be Aliens, then the Dark Horse comics from the 90s. But I will say that this movie's plot it feels very much like one of those Dark Horse comics. Kind of feels also like, the newer Marvel ones, which I'm actually currently going through and reading because I picked up Marvel Unlimited. I finally subscribed to that. So I've actually been binging the Marvel's, Aliens entries. I haven't gotten to like Avengers versus Alien. I'm just kind of reading the stuff that sort of more takes place in the, the Alien movie universe. I'm liking some of the stuff that they're bringing to the table. Seems like they're peppering in a concept. It's kind of like the Galactus concept where like there's a reason why we haven't found too many other, alien life forms as sentient as we are, because every time they venture out into space, they run into the xenomorph, and and they kind of get wiped out and sort of their DNA incorporated into, the perfect organism. And they've been kind of peppering this throughout Marvel's run. I've seen little hints of it here and there in a couple of the arcs, and I'm kind of digging on that. Can't really point you in a direction of like, oh, this arc is all about that, because it's kind of like a concept they're sort of, I feels like they're kind of adding to the overall mythos of it. So that being said, I do feel like, having grown up reading those Dark Horse comics and having these, little arcs, and if you've never read them, it's not like, Fantastic Four or Spider-Man where they were, issues 1 through like 500 and there was no break and they just kind of kept going. They were kind of like little 4 to 5 to 6 issue arcs, and then once it was over, it would just be a whole new one with a new creative team. There might be some continuity between the arcs, but nothing too major. They would almost be just their own little standalone stories, and that's kind of how Romulus feels. Now, granted, of course, you get more out of it if you've seen Alien and Aliens and know Prometheus and Covenant and all that kind of stuff. You'll get more out of Romulus at that point. But if you haven't, if say you've only seen Alien, if you've only seen Alien, you'll still get a lot out of this movie. So this one pretty much takes place between Alien and Aliens. Plot-wise, it's pretty simple, and again, it kind of feels like a comic book. You follow some Weyland, some kids working on a, functioning colony, which is, first off, very cool to see, because, it's kind of like, oh, this is what Hadley's Hope was or would have been if the xenomorph scourge hadn't wiped them out. But you have a bunch of kids who discover a Weyland-Yutani space station, sort of a derelict space station floating above their planet. They decide to board that derelict space station, steal the cryo chambers and the coolant, for it to work, I guess, or oxygen tanks, whatever it is, and get out of there and basically go to another planet that's not controlled by Weyland-Yutani. It's very simple. Of course, everything that can go wrong does go wrong, and by the end of it, you're left with, only 2 of the whole group, making it off of there. It's kind of like a point A to point B story where these kids have to kind of make their way through the space station and try to survive. The plot isn't overly complicated, but I think it's fun. And that kind of like adds a lot of room. Like what the plot doesn't have as far as complication goes, it allows room for the filmmaker, Fede Alvarez, to kind of, build out the mythos and add to the mythos of the alien lore. And that's one of the things I do really appreciate about this movie. First off, it's a gorgeous film. From beginning to end, it looks amazing. But not just like cinematography wise, like to me, it looks like it feels like it takes place in the Alien universe. And keep in mind, Alien came out in 1979, so the tech in that movie is vastly different than what we have now in real life. And then you have to extrapolate out into the future. It's almost like the Alien universe is like an alternate reality of ours because it's all based off of like 1979 tech. But Romulus feels like it fits right in Alien, right in Aliens. The tech looks accurate. The sound effects look amazing. It's like I said, it's really fun to see a functioning terraformed colony. You get some cool visuals of those, those terraforming reactors that Ripley blows up in Aliens. You see them, in the background on the planet and everything like that. It's just, it's amazing. One of the coolest scenes in the movie was when they took off planet and kind of, shot up through the atmosphere, and just how violent that was and everything like that. Another bit of like fleshing out of the world that I enjoyed is for a very quick second, you see the android Andy playing this like 8-bit, well, it looks even like older than 8-bit. It's almost like Atari 2600. But it's kind of like, it's like a colonial marine shooting these little spider creatures as, he kind of goes up the screen. It's kind of like, looks like a little bit of Contra with some 8-bit graphics and everything. And what I liked about that was it kind of made me think of when Frost says in Aliens, the colonial marine Frost, he says, it's a bug hunt. It's another bug hunt. I always, even when I was a kid, when Gorman said, it's a xenomorph, I understood that as every alien life form that they encounter is going to be a quote-unquote xenomorph. Now, they assume that, it's going to be something probably the size of a facehugger and nothing that they can't handle. Because, the question is if it's a stand-up fight, sir, or is it a bug hunt? So it's like, my idea is that colonial marines are kind of either dealing with putting down revolutions, putting down anti-Weyland-Yutani, protests, stuff like that, probably fighting other people, or they get called in to maybe clear out some invasive species, that's not terribly, all that hard to fight. Yeah, obviously, the xenomorph being the biggest thing they've ever encountered, clearly in Aliens. And as a franchise, we've taken the term xenomorph and we've just put it onto the alien because obviously it's easier than saying aliens but then everything is an alien, everything they encounter. So I kind of, took this little video game here and I was like, oh, this is probably what, Hudson was asking, is a stand-up fight or a bug hunt? It's a xenomorph, and then Frost says it's a bug hunt. I kind of take it as like, that's kind of what they were expecting, and that video game sort of, portrays that, So I thought that was really freaking cool. Seeing, again, spoilers, and this is all kind of going to sort of the world and the mythos and everything this movie's sort of adding to the franchise. You see Rook, who is Ian Holm, played by an Ian Holm puppet. But I love seeing him there and this idea that, like, different science officers may have different names, but they all look like Ian Holm. Just like, all maybe the military ones all look like Bishop, So I think that was a pretty cool idea. And to the whole, how well did the Ian Holm maquette look? Well, I know that, so Fede Alvarez apparently said that, they kind of cleaned up the effects from the movie to the 4K. I saw this movie in the theater, and I have the 4K. Honestly, I can't really tell the difference. It sort of looks the same to me, but at the same time, I didn't have that big of a problem with it in the theater. And apparently, he claims that they kind of toned down the CGI and relied more on the puppet. And it does have kind of like a fake non-CGI look, which I'm fine with because he's an android that's been ripped in half. So it kind of didn't really bother me. Trust me, guys, this is not the thing I had a problem with when I saw, the movie in the theater. Speaking of androids, though, the guy who plays Andy, the android in the movie, David Jonsson, holy shit, he is hands down the best part of this movie. They do some really cool android shit with him, like when he's getting rebooted and his eyes roll back to white and there's like a Weyland-Yutani symbol on his eyeballs. That is just the freaking best. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I absolutely love. As far as actors go, I actually liked everyone in it. You have Rain, played by Cailee Spaeny. Andy, who I said, played by David Jonsson. Tyler's by Archie Renaux. Kay is Isabela Merced, and Bjorn is Spike Fern, and Navarro is Eileen Wu. Everyone in the cast, I think, did a spectacular job. I know some people have a problem with Bjorn, played by Spike Fern. I thought he was fine. He's a bit of a dick, a bit of a hothead, but I understand it. They give the reasoning. His parents were killed, or his mom was killed by an android who kind of had to trap her in the mine. They decided to kill 3 people in the mine to save like 5, or 10 or something like that. So, it's a logical thing to do. But of course, it creates this tension between Bjorn and Andy. So I think the cast is cool. It's a small cast. So, right when you meet them, that most of them are going to die. But it also means that the body count for this movie is kind of low. It's not the highest body count out there because there's just not that many characters. After Eileen Wu, the next person who is listed is Rosie Ed, who was the Weyland-Yutani officer that you see for literally like 3 minutes in the movie. That's how small the cast is. But like I said, the plot's pretty simple. Point A to point B. The 2 teams kind of get split up and, shenanigans happens. If I don't have to spoil something for you, I'm not going to, just in case you haven't seen the movie. Let's talk about the aliens, though. I think they looked fantastic. Now, I think it's very little CGI. I think it's mostly practical effects, even on the facehuggers. They look great. They're in the water. They're running around. They're doing stuff. I think there's like a couple scenes where there's like a tidal wave of facehuggers. That's probably CGI, where they probably fill out the ranks with some CGI ones. But for the most part, it's all practical from my understanding. But the full, drones and warriors, those are people in costumes, and they look great. They are shot so well. There's one shot in particular where it's more towards the end. Andy kind of gets incapacitated in this tunnel that they're running down that's kind of like cocoons and everything around it. But there's this beautiful shot of Rain sort of looking back at Andy, and there's like just a drone sort of half crouching, half standing behind him. Obviously it's waiting for her to come back so it can strike, but it just has this like unnatural pose to it that I think is just fantastic. The close-ups on the aliens look great. Their mouths are opening, drool is, dripping down and everything. It's really good. I love the way that the alien is portrayed in this. And there's more than one. Movie kind of goes in a direction that I didn't expect it to, with having a bunch of aliens sort of at the end, but they kind of get wiped out in one action scene, which I enjoyed. It's really cool. You kind of get this, you get a glimpse of an early pulse rifle, like an early prototype pulse rifle that has auto locking, so it can like one of the smart guns in Aliens. It has auto locking, and it can auto target and everything like that. And you see that and you're like, well, why doesn't the Marines have it on all their pulse rifles? Well, because if capitalism in 2025 teaches you anything, the grunts, it's going to be too expensive to make that targeting system on every pulse rifle. So they put it on the smart guns and then give the regular grunts a targeting enhanced pulse rifle because, well, they're grunts. They're kind of expendable. So that, makes sense to me. Let's kind of get into the connection to Prometheus, though. So the black goo does feature heavily into this. It's proposed that it was reverse engineered from finding Kane's son, the original alien from Alien. They find the Nostromo blown up, and they find Kane's son, in like this cocoon that it creates floating in space. It still has the harpoon in it that Ripley shot into it. I mean, trust me, Fede Alvarez clearly loves the entire franchise, not just a few movies here and there. He loves the entire Alien franchise, and I gotta give him props for that. So the science officer on the Romulus space station, Romulus and Remus, basically reverse engineered what they discovered from Kane's son, and they were able to like bioengineer, thus I think like bio 3D printing facehuggers, and they kind of found the black goo, you know, everything from Prometheus and everything like that. And Rook even kind of mentions, you know, that this was, you know, we finally achieved Wayland's dream and, you know, grabbing Prometheus, bringing back the fire, yada, yada, yada. So, you know, through dialogue, obviously, you know, the Prometheus mission happened and everything like that. And I gotta say, again, as someone who's not the biggest fan of Prometheus, I think Romulus does a better job with the black goo than that movie did. Like, this is much more straightforward. You know, it kind of like you inject it into a living organism and it'll heal that organism, but then it'll also mutate that organism. It's pretty, you know, kind of straightforward idea. Unlike Prometheus, which was just kind of all over the place. And you know, I don't think Ridley Scott kind of had an idea of, you know, what he wanted the black goo to ultimately be, other than sort of a, you know, kind of a MacGuffin, you know, just a plot point. You know, so that, of course, leads to a pregnant character, massive spoilers, guys and gals, at this point. That leads to a pregnant character injecting themselves because they took too much damage and they're going to die. But to save their baby, they inject themselves. Unfortunately, the black goo turns their baby into a human engineer alien hybrid. And I remember first time I saw it in the theater, I immediately knew what I was getting. Like what sucked was, and I think what shocked me the most was the moment that it happened, I knew what the outcome was going to be. And they have like this kid, I think he was like a Russian or Ukrainian basketball player. And it's funny because I remember seeing videos of this kid like years ago playing basketball, and he's like freaking 7 foot tall or something like that. But he has a very unique body. And the moment that I saw the offspring in this, I could immediately tell that it was that, you know, actor / athlete. And I think that was something that kind of took me out of it, because I was like, oh, like, I mean, it looks cool. Like, I get it. But at the same time, like, all I could kind of see was the basketball player underneath. I mean, it looks just like him because it's like the outfit's like skin tight and everything, you know what I mean? So it's, you can't really hide anything. So it's like, okay, you know, and that kind of happened to me in The Void. If you listen to that review, there's an actor in that movie that was like as one of the creatures that kind of does this contortion thing where they can sort of spider walk, but upside down. And like every time I see that effect being done, it's always by the same stunt performer, and it just kind of like takes me out of it. And the same thing happens here, but I don't want to like crap on it completely. I mean, it is what it is. Like I said, at this point, I've seen the movie about 5 times, so it's not as shocking to me. And the last time I watched it, I was really able to just say, okay, fuck it. I'm just let myself go and just, you know, watch that third act and just, you know, enjoy it for the creature feature that it is. And I mean, like Fede Alvarez, I think does a great job of creating a fun third act with a pretty cool looking monster. It's just my expectations going into the movie, coupled with my disdain for Prometheus. You know, as a part of the Aliens franchise, I actually enjoy Prometheus and Covenant as a movie, or as movies. Like as sci-fi horror films, I actually enjoy them. I just don't want them as a part of my Alien franchise, because as a kid, one of my favorite things about Alien was the fact that you didn't know anything about the space jockey or the cargo he was carrying when the Nostromo discovered him. That mystery just was one of the things that as a kid I loved. So, you know, obviously Prometheus is what it is. And again, I accept it all. I accept the franchise as a whole. And this movie does a great job of making it a bridge between everything. I would say the biggest connection to Resurrection is that the offspring kind of gives me, I don't even know what the hell that creature was called, but, you know, that weird baby face, pot belly piece of shit in Resurrection, you know, was, but it kind of gives vibes of that because it's kind of like fleshy and everything. But as a whole, even with me not loving the third act, I do very much enjoy the movie as a whole. I think it's a fun time from beginning to end. I think there's a lot of cool action in it. And I think there's some pretty interesting deaths in it. I'll kind of like, because now we're at sort of towards the end of things, I'll talk about some of the cool deaths. I really liked Navarro's chest burster. I mean, that was just fantastic. The actress was amazing. Is it as good as Kane's? No, nothing ever will be. But it's the second best chest burster scene in the entire franchise. I think it's fantastic the way they incorporated this like X-ray lamp thing. I mean, as a kid, we've all put a flashlight up to our hand and we're able to like sort of see through our hand. This thing is that, but like, times 100. And you basically get to see the alien, break her rib cages, from the inside. It's really freaking cool. Tyler's death, getting the second mouth crushing your face, that was, fantastic. That was a good one. Then you got Bjorn kind of getting like his face slashed, knocked down, then acid dripped on him. And it kind of burns its way through his chest and into the power couplings behind him is really cool. And finally you have Isabela Merced, who plays Kay. She kind of sort of dies off screen, but the offspring kind of, you know what? Just go watch it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you have seen it, you know what happens. I do want to say the one thing that I truly would have cut. And, again, the ending is what it is. The one moment that I would have cut out of the entire fucking movie is when Andy saves Rain from an alien, from a xenomorph, from attacking her, a full-sized xenomorph, not a facehugger. He saves her, and he kind of like lands on the xenomorph and shoots it with the pulse rifle, and he says, "Get away from her, shoot, 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 you bitch." And that was the biggest offense that I think this movie did. Now, I think it would have been perfect if he just said, "Get away from her," and shot her, and then that was it. But the fact that Ripley says, "Get away from her, you bitch," first off, she's talking to the queen. So we as viewers already kind of have an idea that it's a feminine character or a feminine, alien life form. Whereas, I think that the drones and the main Xeno warriors and drones always kind of coded male. And so when Andy says, "Get away from her, you bitch," it's not that it's taking, it is. It's taking the thunder away from Ripley later because this technically takes place before it. So now technically Andy's the first one to say it, but it also kind of doesn't track because you kind of don't really track the drone as a female. You always sort of track him as male. So, maybe I'm wrong in that, but I don't think I'm wrong in the fact that, that was a bad choice. I don't think they should have gone with that. And again, I think the fix is just say, "Get away from her." And then, that's it. But on the whole, like I said, I think this movie's great. I think it's a great contribution to the Alien franchise. I enjoy it as an Alien movie much more than Prometheus and Covenant. And actually, I'm not going to lie to you. And again, go listen to my Ready to Retro review because that was much more fresh. But I'm kind of now I'm doing a little bit of a 180 because this movie and what they do with the black goo and how they sort of make it a bit more streamlined, it actually makes me appreciate Prometheus a little bit more. Headcanon wise, I'm still going to always be Aliens, then all the Dark Horse comics after that. And then everything else is kind of like a tertiary, almost like in my head, like a what if. But this is probably the closest, I've come to like having an Alien movie that I truly love outside of Alien and Aliens. And I've grown to really love Alien 3, but specifically the assembly cut. If you have the quadrilogy, go check out the assembly cut of Alien 3. It's the closest thing we'll ever get to a director's cut. But I do love Alien 3, but it's not quite my headcanon. But this, for me, is up there. I kind of would put this sort of right on that ground of Alien 3. some people would probably hear that and be like, well, that's a terrible comparison because Alien 3 sucked. But again, I don't know. I don't think that movie sucks. I think Alien Resurrection sucks. Even though there's things I like in Alien Resurrection, I think that movie, I can honestly say, sucks. Like, I try to watch it like once every few years just to see if it grows on me. And it's kind of the opposite. I kind of get more and more like sort of turned off by Alien Resurrection. So I'd happily put this one higher than that. I have very few things that I dislike about it. The third act's not my cup of tea, but I don't necessarily ding it because, you know, this movie does what it sets out to do, which is to be a bridge for every single Alien franchise film. And in that regard, I think it did its job. I think it did what it was supposed to do. And just because I don't like one aspect of it doesn't mean that I think it's a bad movie overall. I think it's a beautifully shot film. I think it's a beautifully created film. I think a lot of hard work went into the prosthetic effects and the aliens and the facehuggers, but also the set design and, you know, the gun design and you know, all that kind of stuff. Guys and gals, when I say that this bridges the entire franchise, like there's even a nod to the video game Alien Isolation. When they get into a new part of the ship, you can see what is basically the save system, you know, where you save your game, like a little terminal in Alien Isolation where you save your game, save your progress. You see it there. Like it's right by the door where it should be in Alien Isolation. So again, this movie's a love letter to the entire franchise, and I won't take that away from it. Truly, the only place that I think it actually empirically falters is Get Away From Her, You Bitch. But, you know, I'll just erase that from my memory over time. But all in all, as someone who loves the Aliens universe, as much as I love the Star Wars universe, I think this movie is a fitting contribution to that universe. Let me know what you think. Leave us a comment on Spotify. You know, you can do comments there. Leave us a comment on Instagram whenever I promote the episode, or leave us a comment on Patreon. And let me know if I'm right, wrong. You know, am I an idiot? Am I, should I read something that will make the whole thing, all the Prometheus and Covenant make sense? You know, is there something I should read to do that? So I'm open. I'm open to anything. I'm open for any kind of aliens discussion. I love talking about aliens. And with that, I'll just say we'll catch you on the dark side.
Be sure to subscribe to Podcasting After Dark and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Support Podcasting After Dark on Patreon. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Podcasting After Dark. And visit us next time for another installment of Podcasting After Dark with Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer.